The desert morning was still cool when Luke Maddox spotted the buzzards circling above the narrow ravine. Something about the lazy dipping pattern of their wings made his stomach tighten. He nudged his horse forward, expecting to find a dying calf for some stray ranch animal. But when he reached the edge of the ravine and peered down, the sight hit him harder than any outlaw's bullet. An elderly Apache woman lay crumpled beside a collapsed mule, her braid dusty, her shawl torn, and her lips moving as though whispering prayers to the earth. Luke climbed down carefully, calling out to her, but she didn't respond until he knelt beside her with his canteen, her eyes fluttered open, dark and weary, filled with both pain and dignity. Luke helped her sip water, noticing the bruises on her arms, finger-shaped bruises from rough handling. She was no wanderer who had simply fallen. Someone had attacked her. She tried to speak, struggling through a mix of English and Apache words. But Luke understood the most important part. 3 men, outlaws, the Carter brothers. He knew them well. Thieves, liars, and cowards who'd hurt anyone they thought wouldn't fight back. Luke didn't hesitate. He lifted the woman gently onto his horse and carried her to his camp just beyond the ridge. After a fire was built and she had more water, she finally told him her name, Nayland, grandmother of 2 Rivers, a respected elder from a nearby Apache settlement. She had been on her way home when the outlaws ambushed her. Believing she carried tribal silver, Luke knew instantly that taking her back alone would mean stepping straight into the Carter brothers' path. But when Nayland attempted to stand and nearly fell, insisting she must reach her people before sunset, Luke made his decision. Without thinking, he told her he would take her himself. As they rode together across the red earth, Nayland shared quiet stories, old trails, mountain spirits, warriors who protected strangers even when fate demanded great risk. Luke listened, feeling a strange sense of weight settle on him, as if her stories were choosing him for something he didn't yet understand. When the first gunshot cracked across the plains and a bullet tore through his hat, Luke jerked the reins and shielded Nayland with his body. 3 riders thundered toward them. Luke fired back, determined to keep his promise. They barely escaped into the dusk, breathless, shaken, but alive, tied together now by danger, destiny, and a vow Luke knew he would die before breaking. The sun climbed higher as Luke and grandmother Nan entered the Red Canyon, a place he had always avoided, unless absolutely necessary. The canyon walls rose on both sides like jagged giants, narrowing the path into a tight passage, where echoes twisted and shadows hid anything that wished to stay unseen. Luke kept one hand on his reins and the other near his revolver, every sense sharpened by the knowledge that Beck Carter and his men were somewhere behind them, hungry for revenge. Nayland, however, sat calm and straight-backed on the horse, humming an old Apache tune that drifted softly against the stone walls. Her serenity made Luke uneasy, not because it bothered him, but because it felt like she saw something he didn't, something inevitable. When they reached a dry stream bed, Luke stopped to let the horses rest. Nayland reached into her woven pouch and handed him a small leather bundle. Inside was a carved stone marked with symbols he didn't recognize. She told him it was a warrior's blessing, given only to those who protected life without expecting reward. Luke felt awkward with the gift, unsure he deserved it. But she nodded firmly until he tucked it into his coat. Not long after, they resumed riding. Luke noticed fresh hoof prints. In the dust, 3 horses riding hard and fast, his pulse tightened. Carter's gang was close, too close. He urged the horses forward, but before they reached the canyon bend, gunfire exploded behind them. The sharp crack echoed wildly, making it impossible to tell where the bullets came from. Luke yanked Nayland behind a boulder as chips of stone burst around them. He fired back, aiming toward the flashes he spotted between the rocks. The outlaws shouted taunts, claiming, no cowboy should die for an old Apache woman. Luke ignored every word, focusing only on keeping Nayland hidden and alive. When his ammunition started to run low, Luke made a desperate decision. He slapped his horse's flank, sending it charging across the canyon to draw the outlaws' attention. As they turned toward the distraction, Luke scrambled up the canyon wall, using roots and jagged ledges to climb. When Beck Carter rode underneath him, Luke dropped from the rocks, tackling the outlaw leader clean out of his saddle. The fight that followed was brutal, fists, dust, and fury. Carter pulled a knife, but Luke kicked it away and struck him hard enough to drop him unconscious. The remaining outlaws fled into the canyon, breathless and bleeding. Luke returned to Nalan. She met him with herbs and gentle hands, treating his wounds with a wisdom older than the desert itself. As she worked, she told him courage like his was rare, and that her people honored such hearts. Luke wasn't sure about any honor, but as they continued their journey, he could feel the truth. Every step was pulling him towards something waiting just beyond the horizon, something he was meant to find. By the time Luke and grandmother Neralan reached the outskirts of the Apache village, the sun had dipped low, painting the desert in streaks of crimson and gold. The air smelled of mesquite smoke and cooling earth. Children spotted them first, their excited shouts carrying across the camp as they ran to greet the grandmother. Warriors approached too, their expressions stern at first, hands resting on spears and rifles until they recognized Nalan. Relief washed over their faces, and the tension melted like snow in springtime. Nine slid carefully from the horse, leaning on Luke only long enough to steady herself before standing tall, her dignity unshaken despite her injuries. Luke expected nothing more than a brief nod of thanks, maybe a meal and a safe place to sleep. But instead, the chief, Nalan's son, broadish-shouldered and proud, stepped forward and raised his hand in a gesture of respect. He spoke of how Beck Carter's gang had tormented the region for months. Luke's courage hadn't just saved Nalan. It had weakened a group of men who had long preyed on both settlers and Apache alike. The tribe invited Luke to sit among them for the evening gathering. The council fire burned bright, casting dancing shadows as storytellers spoke of past heroes and the trials of their people. Luke felt strangely out of place, yet deeply honored as Nalan recounted the ambush and the cowboy who had fought off death itself to protect an elder. Her words carried weight, every elder nodded as if acknowledging some ancient truth fulfilled. When the ceremony ended, Luke felt a heavy warmth settle in his chest. Something deeper than gratitude. Later, Nalan brought him into her hut. The inside was dim but warm, filled with the scent of sage and old cedar. She told him she had felt a vision the moment he lifted her from the ravine. A whisper of fate, of a man whose heart walked the path of a warrior, even though he wore no feathers or tribal marks. She opened a carved wooden chest and took out a necklace made of turquoise and silver. She placed it around Luke's neck, saying it symbolized honor, protection, and a bond formed through courage. Luke tried to protest, but she silenced him with a look that held generations behind it. Then she told him her granddaughter Ayanna would be traveling to the trading post in 2 days. She hoped Luke would stay long enough to meet her. Something in her tone hinted she already knew what fate was weaving. And when Luke finally saw Ayanna the next morning, strong, graceful with fire in her eyes, he understood. This was the true reward Neralan had spoken of. Not silver, not praise, but a new beginning he never knew he needed.